They mocked his voice, his look, even called his band fascist. Freddie Mercury was humiliated by critics and rejected by America. Then came Live Aid, 1985. In that 20-minute performance, everything they once hated become everything they now praised. But to understand why those 20 minutes at Wembley shocked the world, you need to see what critics were saying about him just months before Live Aid. Because by 1984, the music industry had declared war on Freddie Mercury. By the late 1970s, Freddie Mercury was one of the most talked about figures in rock music. Queen was packing stadiums all over Europe, but in the US, critics weren't so kind. They said he was too flashy, too dramatic, and some even called him fake and full of himself because of his wild outfits and over-the-top stage moves. Now before we go deep, hit that subscribe button now if you're tired of hearing the same old stories and want the truth behind the legends. And back to his life, the media went hard on him. British tabloids made fun of everything: his teeth, his sexuality, even how he performed on stage. Then in 1984, Queen released the music video for I Want to Break Free, where Freddie dressed in drag. Right away, there was a huge backlash. MTV in America banned the video, saying it was offensive. Hardcore rock fans didn't like that Queen kept changing styles. One week, they put out a dramatic opera-style song, and the next, it was a funky disco track. Critics didn't know how to label them, so they started tearing them down instead. People kept saying, "This isn't real rock," but the harshest judgment came from other musicians. Some quietly said that Freddie was just Flash without real talent. They claimed that he was just a guy hiding behind costumes and drama, an immigrant trying too hard to belong. And what about the twist? They were actually right about that part, even if they didn't realize how deep it went. His real name was Farooq Bilsara, born in Zanzibar to Parsi Indian parents. At 8 years old, he was shipped off to boarding school in India, where the nightmare began. Classmates immediately nicknamed him Bucky because of his prominent front teeth, 4 extra teeth that gave him a severe overbite. People teased him non-stop. He even started covering his mouth when he smiled because he felt embarrassed about his teeth. The same teeth that later gave his voice its unique power. Back in 1963, when a political revolution broke out in Zanzibar, his family had to escape. They ended up in London as refugees. At the time, he was just a 16-year-old immigrant boy with unusual teeth, an exotic background, and a growing awareness that he was different in ways he couldn't even name yet. London wasn't welcoming. He was foreign, awkward, trying desperately to reinvent himself. He studied art, played in amateur bands, and slowly transformed. Farooq became Freddie in 1970 when he joined Brian May and Roger Taylor's band. He announced his final metamorphosis: "I'm Freddie Mercury now, the messenger of the gods." And just when he was becoming someone new, the world hated him even more. Now, a very relevant question comes to mind. Why is being different often punished before it's praised? Well, Freddie Mercury's life story might just have the answer. It was 1975, and Queen walked into the studio with a song that could either launch them to greatness or ruin everything. It was 6 minutes long, had no chorus, and jumped between 3 totally different styles. When the record label heard Bohemian Rhapsody, they called it career suicide. "No one will play a 6-minute song on the radio," they said. "It's too weird, too theatrical, too much." But Mercury was obsessed. He spent weeks layering vocals, creating a choir of himself. His bandmates watched him work 14-hour days, perfecting every harmony. The critics laughed. They thought it was a joke, until the entire world started singing along. Bohemian Rhapsody hit #1 and stayed there for 9 weeks. Suddenly, the career suicide song was being called revolutionary. But Freddie wasn't finished, not even close. He gave everything he had in every show, like his life was on the line. His concerts felt more like full-on theater, while most rock stars just stood still at the mic. Freddie owned the stage. Queen kept releasing hit albums: News of the World, The Game, Jazz. With each one, they pushed the limits even more. July 13th, 1985. Wembley Stadium was packed with 72,000 people, and nearly 2 billion more were watching on TV. Queen had just 20 minutes to perform at Live Aid. At first, Freddie almost said no. He was tired, the band was falling apart, and he wasn't sure they had anything left to prove. But he changed his mind, and he started, and in the Wembley Stadium, the crowd went wild. It was like a spark had been lit. People screamed, sang along, and couldn't believe what they were witnessing. Freddie had them in the palm of his hands from the very first moment. Then came Radio Gaga, and something magical happened. All of the 72,000 people, every single one of them, raise their hands and clap together in perfect rhythm, right above their heads. Amazing, isn't it? Don't you wish you could have been there? Now, the same critics who spent years calling him over the top were now speechless. They didn't know what to say. Even Time magazine later said that Queen stole the show at Live Aid. All that hate, it quickly turned into pure admiration. It was 1987, and Queen was at the peak of their success. That's when Freddie got news that had changed his life. He was diagnosed as HIV positive. Back then, in the 1980s, AIDS was seen as a death sentence, and most people didn't understand it at all. Freddie made a tough decision, and he chose to keep it completely private. That choice would shape how he lived the rest of his life. While Freddie was quietly fighting the disease, the tabloids went after him like sharks. They followed him to his doctor visits and studied every photo, looking for any hint that he was sick. In 1990, The Sun ran a front-page story with the headline, "The Sad Face of Freddie Mercury," showing a photo where he looked thin and weak. It was cruel and heartless. The way the press treated him was shockingly cruel. They were the same people who once made fun of his bold style, and now they were chasing him down like he was some kind of target. Every time he stepped out in public, he had to act like everything was okay. He had to smile, stand tall, and pretend he was healthy even though deep down, his body was slowly giving up. But Freddie didn't let himself become a victim. Even as he got sicker, he kept going. He kept recording music. In 1991, Queen finished the Innuendo album, and somehow his voice sounded even stronger, even though his body was getting weaker. It was like he was giving every last bit of himself to the music. He knew his time was running out, but he worked harder than ever. On November 23, 1991, after years of rumor and speculation, Freddie Mercury finally spoke out. In a short and respectful statement, he confirmed that he was tested HIV positive and has AIDS. It was a quiet and dignified moment, true to the way that he had handled everything, strong, private, and on his own terms. And sadly, 24 hours later, he was gone. The world stood still. The same man people had judged and criticized for years was now seen as one of a kind, someone who could never be replaced. At his funeral, Elton John broke down in tears. David Bowie called him a true original. Even Rolling Stone, the magazine that once called Queen fascist, now praised Freddie Mercury as one of rock's greatest performers. The people who once doubted him were now the ones honoring him. But the real tribute came 4 months later, April 20th, 1992, Wembley Stadium again, but this time for the Freddie Mercury tribute concert. David Bowie, Elton John, George Michael, and dozens more took the stage to honor the man they now called a legend. The surviving Queen members watched from the side as 72,000 people sang every word to every song. Modern artists continue the reverence. Lady Gaga calls him the ultimate performer. Adam Lambert, who now tours with Queen, says Mercury showed us it's okay to be different. Taylor Swift credits him with teaching her that vulnerability and strength can coexist. Today, a statue of Freddie Mercury overlooks Lake Geneva in Switzerland, where fans leave flowers daily. Google honored him with a doodle. His childhood home in Zanzibar is a pilgrimage site for music lovers. The performer, sometimes called fake, ended up creating some of the most real and powerful moments in rock history. Isn't it amazing how fate can turn our lives around in such a beautiful way? Rolling Stone eventually placed Bohemian Rhapsody on their greatest songs list. The BBC voted Mercury one of 100 greatest Britons. The same critic who called Queen fascist now called them pioneers. The boy they once called Bucky grew into the legend the world knows as Mercury. And that's the kind of magic that never fades. Did this story inspire you? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.